Welcome to Griffonomics.
It is great to be here.
Imagine a company that screens more people every single day than the entire Transportation Security Administration.
Right. The scale is just hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. A company that acts as the literal physical front door to the biggest stadiums in the world, the largest school districts in the country, and thousands of hospitals.
Yeah.
And yet, a few unrecorded handshake deals by their sales team managed to wipe out $300 million of their market value almost overnight.
I mean, it is one of the most fascinating paradoxes in the public markets right now.
Totally.
You have this world-class, life-saving technology
Right.
running headfirst into just absolute back-office chaos.
Exactly. So if you are listening to this right now, you are probably looking at your portfolio or maybe prepping for a strategic meeting, and you're trying to make sense of this exact paradox.
Right. You want to know if this is a massive opportunity or a trap.
Yeah. You want to know if this company is a generational buy or, a falling knife. So we are giving you a granular strategic report and a complete investment roadmap for Evolv Technologies. Ticker symbol EVLV.
And we really dug into the primary sources for this one.
We did. We pulled together a massive stack of sources to get to the bottom of this. We are parsing their 2025 Form 10-K, diving deep into the Q4 2025 earnings call transcripts from March of 2026.
Yeah, those transcripts were revealing.
Very. Plus, we're breaking down investigative reports, including this truly revealing December 2024 piece by Hunterbrook Media, and, cross-referencing a slew of corporate press releases.
And our mission for this deep dive is to explore Evolv's fundamental and, frankly, pretty painful transformation.
Yeah, painful is the right word.
We are watching a company trying to pivot from being a legacy hardware vendor into a highly profitable, high-margin AI software platform.
So to give you that roadmap, we are going to meticulously unpack their transition to direct fulfillment. We'll analyze the genuinely surprising customer loyalty they maintained following a Federal Trade Commission settlement.
Which, by the way, would have bankrupted most other companies.
Oh, absolutely. And finally, we will analyze the intense market speculation surrounding a highly strategic board crossover with a multi-billion-dollar giant, Axon Enterprise.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. Let's just dive right into the deep end here. Let's start with the business model and this massive SaaS, software as a service transformation.
Right.
Because if you just look at the top line numbers, Evolv is printing money. In 2025, they pulled in total revenue of $145.9 million.
Yeah, which is up 40% year over year.
Right. And in this macroeconomic environment, a 40% growth rate is just staggering.
It is staggering. But the raw number isn't the most important takeaway for an investor here.
Okay, then what is?
It is the composition of that $145.9 million. Out of that total, $113.2 million came directly from subscriptions and services. Yeah, compare that to just $21.6 million from actual physical hardware products. That ratio is everything.
So they are fundamentally tilting the entire enterprise toward recurring revenue.
Exactly.
Right. But getting to that tilt required them to blow up their existing business model. And this is where I really need you to explain the mechanics to me, because Evolv deliberately allowed its legacy distributor licensing agreement with a company called Columbia Tech to expire.
Yeah, on December 31st, 2025.
Why? If Evolv is an AI software company, why were they working with Columbia Tech in the first place?
So to understand the pivot, you have to understand the origin story. When Evolv was essentially a startup, they had brilliant AI and sensor technology, right?
Right.
But they didn't have a massive global supply chain. Building these physical archways, manufacturing the metal, sourcing the electromagnetic sensors, shipping these giant units around.
That sounds expensive.
Incredibly capital intensive. So they utilized a distributor licensing model. Evolv essentially licensed its intellectual property to Columbia Tech.
Okay, so Columbia Tech did the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Columbia Tech would manufacture the scanners, sell them through a network of third-party resellers, and Evolv would just, collect a licensing fee and some software revenue.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like shifting from selling DVDs through Best Buy to running the entire Netflix streaming platform yourself. So Evolv was basically offloading the entire hardware headache to a middleman.
Pretty much.
That sounds like a great deal for a software company. You sit in an office in Massachusetts, you write code, and you let someone else deal with the aluminum supply chain.
In the early days, It really was a great deal. It allowed them to scale rapidly without burning through billions in capital expenditures.
Right.
But as they matured, the fatal flaw of the distributor model became really obvious, which is friction and distance.
Distance from the customer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you rely on a third-party distributor and their resellers, you lose control over the customer relationship. The reseller actually owns the contract.
Ah, I see.
And if the customer has a bad installation experience, they blame Evolv, even though Evolv didn't even do the installation.
Right, the brand takes the hit.
Exactly. But more importantly, to build a truly sticky ecosystem, which is what Wall Street actually values, you need the customer entirely dependent on you.
So they let the Columbia Tech deal die. And now they have shifted to direct fulfillment. They brought the entire logistical headache in-house.
Precisely. They've rolled out two primary models to replace the middleman. The first is what they call the pure subscription model.
How does that work?
In this scenario, the customers say a massive NFL stadium doesn't even buy the hardware. They lease the physical archways directly from Evolv, but is bundled with an ironclad, multi-year SaaS contract.
Okay, and the second model?
The second is the purchase subscription model. Here, a school district might use grant money to buy the hardware up front directly from Evolv.
Right, because schools have those one-time security grants.
Exactly. But the hardware is basically a brick without the software. So they still have to sign a multi-year SaaS agreement to actually operate the machine and get the AI updates.
Okay, I have to push back on this strategy. Taking on direct hardware fulfillment actually sounds like a massive logistical headache for a software-focused company.
Is a lot to take on, yeah.
I mean, it's like Gillette giving away the razor for free, but making a razor that only accepts one specific, highly profitable blade for the next 4 years. But razors are cheap. These scannels are massive, complex pieces of machinery.
They are.
Isn't taking on direct hardware fulfillment a massive anchor for a company that wants SaaS multiples from Wall Street?
Well, it is an anchor in the short term.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the only way to build a defensible economic moat.
Okay, explain that.
Think about legacy competitors in the physical security space. Companies like OFI Systems or Leidos, the ones making those massive X-ray belts at the airport.
The gray bins and the conveyor belts.
Yeah. Their business model is largely transactional. They sell a piece of hardware, maybe attach a modest low-margin maintenance contract, and they just move on to the next sale. Evolv isn't trying to sell a metal detector. They're building a closed-loop ecosystem.
A closed loop, meaning the customer can't easily rip it out and go to a competitor.
Exactly. By fulfilling directly, Evolv forces the customer into a direct, 4-year, non-cancelable contract. Evolv now owns the entire technology stack.
So hardware, software, everything.
They own the hardware, they own the proprietary software running on it, and crucially, they own the data flowing through it. When you own the whole stack, the switching costs for the customer become astronomically high.
Yeah, I can imagine.
If a stadium wants to leave Evolv after 4 years, they don't just cancel a software license. They have to physically unbolt the machines from the concrete, retrain their entire security staff, and lose all their historical arrival data. Nobody wants to do that.
Okay, strategically, the razor and blade model makes total sense. I see the moat. But if I'm looking at their 2025 financials, changing your entire fulfillment model usually comes with a painful, immediate price tag.
Oh, it absolutely does.
Right, so if they're taking on the manufacturing and the shipping, how much money are they bleeding to get these machines in the door?
This is where we really have to look at the math of the J-curve, because this is the strategic inflection point that absolutely defined Evolv's 2025.
Okay, the J-curve.
A J-curve is what happens when a company fundamentally changes its model to favor long-term recurring revenue over short-term transactional profits. The financial line dips down drastically, like the letter J, before swooping upward.
So things get worse before they get better.
Exactly. Let's look at the profitability milestone first, because the swoop upward is actually starting to happen. For the full year 2025, Evolv posted a positive adjusted EBITDA of $11.1 million.
Like 11.1 million positive. Because in 2024, they were bleeding cash. Didn't they lose like 21 million in 2024?
Right, so that is a massive $32.1 million swing into the green. They finally proved to Wall Street that this direct fulfillment model can actually generate a positive return at scale.
But where is the dip in the J-curve? I mean, if EBITDA is up, where did they take the hit?
They took the hit directly on the hardware. You have to contrast that positive overall EBITDA with the brutal reality of their fulfillment pivot cost.
Oh, okay.
because they took on direct hardware fulfillment and because they are still subscale, meaning they haven't optimized their new manufacturing lines yet. Their product gross margins just fell off a cliff.
How far off a cliff?
In 2024, when they were just licensing through Columbia Tech, their product gross margins were 66%. In 2025, under the direct model, those margins compressed to a negative 12%.
Negative 12%. Stop right there. I want you, the listener, to really internalize this. If I'm an investor looking at a balance sheet and I see a company selling its core physical product at a negative 12% margin, I am hitting the sell button.
It definitely triggers some alarms.
It sounds like a quick, highly efficient way to go bankrupt. Is this just the old dot-com era joke, we lose money on every sale, but we make it up in volume?
It sounds exactly like that joke. But you have to understand the unit economics of a multi-year SaaS contract. Yes, they're losing 12 cents on every dollar of hardware they sell right now.
Right.
But Evolv made the calculated strategic decision to absorb that short-term margin compression up front. Why? Because it is the cost of customer acquisition.
Okay.
Taking that negative 12% hit is the toll they have to pay to capture the significantly higher lifetime annual recurring revenue, the ARR, and the remaining performance obligation, the RPO, over the life of those 4-year contracts.
Okay, so you take a loss on day one to guarantee high margin cash flow for the next 48 months. Let's make this concrete. The earnings call transcripts from March 2026 mention a very specific deal. Walk me through the math on that.
Sure. So during the Q4 call, leadership highlighted a $3.8 million contract with a large, unnamed education customer based in Georgia. Because this school district opted for the purchase subscription model under the new direct fulfillment strategy, Evolv recognized a massive spike in product revenue for that quarter. They sold them a ton of machines up front.
But because they are fulfilling it directly and they are inefficient at manufacturing right now, selling those machines dragged their overall product gross margin down to that negative 12%. They took a loss to get the hardware into the Georgia schools.
Precisely. But here is the counter-argument to your bankruptcy fears. While the product margins are negative 12%, you have to look at the margins on the software that the hardware enables.
The recurring part.
Right. The core subscription and service gross margins, which remember is where $113 million of their revenue came from, remain incredibly healthy. Evolv's subscription gross margin sits at 56%, and their service gross margin is at a genuinely impressive 71%.
Ah, okay. The hardware really is just the Trojan horse. You lose a little money building the wooden horse, but once you get it inside the gates of Troy, or in this case, the gates of a Georgia high school, the high-margin software revenue starts flowing.
Exactly.
And because it's a 4-year non-cancelable contract, it flows predictably every single month.
Yep. Once those massive physical archways are bolted to the concrete outside the gymnasium, the customer is locked in. The high-margin revenue is totally secured.
I get the strategy, but building Trojan horses and shipping them out at a loss requires an incredible amount of cash. You need a fortress balance sheet to survive the dip in the J-curve while you wait for those 48 months of subscription fees to trickle in.
You really do.
And we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Evolv's 2025 wasn't just a story of a business model pivot. It was a year of absolute corporate turmoil. How did they actually survive the financial realities of 2025 without running out of money?
They survive through aggressive compounding growth in their recurring metrics and some very strategic financing. Let's look at the ARR growth first, because that is the lifeblood of a SaaS company.
Okay.
Annual recurring revenue hit $120.5 million at the end of 2025. That is up 21% year over year.
Nice.
But the truly vital metric, the safety net you are asking about, is their RPO. The remaining performance obligation reached a staggering $293.6 million.
Let's define RPO for a second, just because it's crucial. RPO is essentially a company's backlog of contracted revenue that hasn't been recognized on the income statement yet.
Correct.
So this means Evolv has nearly $300 million in guaranteed, legally binding future revenue just sitting in the pipeline waiting to be billed over the next few years.
Exactly. That RPO number proves to creditors that the future cash flow is secure. And speaking of creditors, to fund this expensive hardware transition without burning through all their cash reserves, Evolv secured a $75 million credit facility with MidCap Financial Trust.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. As of the end of 2025, they had drawn down $30 million of that, leaving them with plenty of dry powder. They ended the year with $69 million in cash and marketable securities.
And we have to emphasize how important non-dilutive financing is here for you, the listener. If you are an existing shareholder, the last thing you want is for a company to issue 10 million new shares of stock to fund a factory line, because that crushes the value of your existing shares.
Right. Nobody wants dilution.
By using the mid-cap credit facility, Evolv funded the pivot using debt backed by that massive RPO backlog rather than diluting their investors. Plus, their operating cash flow turned positive for the first time, hitting $18.7 million.
Which is really the holy grail for a transitioning SaaS company. Generating $18.7 million in positive operating cash flow means the day-to-day business operations are finally funding themselves.
That's huge.
It is. They aren't relying entirely on external capital to keep the lights on, even if their free cash flow is still negative due to the heavy capital expenditures of building the new physical scanners.
Okay, so the underlying math is solid. But here is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit infuriating if you are an investor. Evolv didn't just face the normal friction of a business pivot.
But they did not.
They essentially tripped over their own shoelaces and caused a massive self-inflicted crisis. We are talking about accounting errors that wiped out $300 million in market cap almost overnight.
It was a disaster.
And I need you to explain this to me because the 10K mentions extra contractual terms. What does that actually mean? How does a tech company nearly destroy itself without the technology ever failing?
It is a textbook case of a sales culture outrunning the accounting department.
What do you mean?
In the enterprise SaaS world, revenue recognition is governed by very strict rules, specifically a standard known as ASC 606.
Okay, let's unpack ASC 606. What does it dictate?
Under ASC 606, if you sign a 4-year contract for a scanner and the software, you cannot claim all that revenue on day one.
Yeah.
You have to recognize it proportionally over the 48 months as you actually deliver the service.
That makes sense.
However, the hardware component, if it's sold up front, can sometimes be recognized immediately. Now, here is where Evolv went off the rails. They had salespeople aggressively trying to close deals. To get a stadium or a school to sign on the dotted line, a sales rep might send an email saying, hey, if you sign today, we'll throw in a free hardware upgrade in year 2, or we'll waive the maintenance fees if the machine breaks.
A handshake deal. A side promise made to grease the wheels.
Exactly. But under ASC 606, those extra contractual terms, those side promises, fundamentally change the entire value allocation of the contract.
How so?
If you promise future free hardware, you have to defer a portion of the initial revenue to cover that future obligation. But Evolv's sales team wasn't formally communicating these side deals to the accounting department. The accountants were recognizing the revenue based on the standard boilerplate contract, completely unaware of the side emails.
Oh, wow. So Evolv was publishing financial statements claiming revenue that legally they weren't allowed to claim yet.
Exactly.
And when the auditors caught this, it triggered a catastrophic chain reaction.
Catastrophic is the right word. Because the financials were unreliable, Evolv had to announce a restatement of their past earnings. And in the public markets, nothing destroys trust faster than the phrase financial restatement.
Yeah, that's a nightmare phrase.
The stock price plummeted. $300 million in market capitalization just vanished.
Yeah.
The board of directors launched an internal investigation. It forced the CEO and the chief financial officer out the door.
Wow.
And inevitably, the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission both launched formal probes.
And as we saw in the Q1 2025 numbers, that chaos isn't cheap. Evolv had a massive cash burn spike of $17 million in a single quarter, just to pay for lawyers, forensic accountants, and severance packages for the executives they fired.
It's brutal.
It really shows you how quickly cash can vanish during a corporate crisis. So how did they fix it? Are they out of the woods?
Well, they have made significant strides, which is detailed extensively in the 2025 10K. First, and most crucially for their survival, the Department of Justice formally closed its criminal probe in August 2025.
Okay, that's good news.
That removes the existential threat of federal indictments. Secondly, when the stock dropped, a wave of consolidated shareholder class action lawsuits naturally followed. Evolv accrued a $15 million liability to settle those suits.
$15 million is a huge hit for a company with $69 million in the bank.
It would be, but crucially, $14 million of that $15 million settlement is expected to be covered by their directors and officers insurance, their D&O policy.
Oh, so the actual out-of-pocket cash hit to Evolv is just the $1 million deductible. That is a massive bullet dodged.
Very lucky.
But what about the underlying rot? How do they stop rogue salespeople from making side deals in the future?
They completely overhauled their internal controls to fix the material weaknesses. They hired a new seasoned chief accounting officer, but more importantly, they instituted what is called a deal desk.
A deal desk. What exactly does that do?
Think of it as a rigid toll booth between the sales team and the final contract. The deal desk is a dedicated, cross-functional internal team comprising legal, finance, and operations that must review and approve every single contract before it goes to the customer.
So no more rogue emails.
Exactly. A sales rep can no longer just email a PDF to a school principal. The deal desk ensures that absolutely no handshake deals, side letters, or extra contractual terms exist outside the central system. It brings enterprise-grade discipline to a culture that was clearly moving way too fast and breaking the wrong things.
Okay, I hear the mechanics of the fix, but I have to push back here on behalf of the listener. If I am an investor, Evolv lost its top leadership. They had to restate years of financials. And while the DOJ is gone, the SEC probe into their accounting is still an active, lingering shadow.
Yes, it is.
Does a new accountant and a deal desk really restore Wall Street's trust? Why shouldn't I just walk away from this stock?
It's a completely valid skepticism. Trust takes years to rebuild, and that SEC probe will absolutely remain an overhang on the stock price until it is formally resolved.
Right.
However, Wall Street ultimately trusts numbers more than narratives.
Yeah.
The fact that Evolv hit that $11.1 million positive EBITDA target in 2025 proves something fundamental. The underlying business engine is humming.
You're saying the product is so good it survived the incompetence of the management.
Precisely. If the core business, the actual demand for the product and the unit economics, was weak, an accounting scandal of this magnitude would have completely bankrupted them.
Yeah, customers would have just bolted.
Customers would have used the turmoil as an excuse to break their contracts. The fact that Evolv grew their top-line revenue by 40% while navigating federal probes and executive turnover speaks volumes about how desperately the market needs this specific technology.
That's a phenomenal transition, because to truly understand why the business survived that corporate turmoil, to understand why hospital administrators and school principals didn't just pack up these massive scanners, put them in a warehouse, and demand refunds when the SEC came knocking, we need to understand the actual technology.
We do.
What makes this Evolv scanner so fundamentally different from a regular metal detector that customers refuse to flee? Let's get into Section 4, the data flywheel.
So the core of Evolv's technology is a proprietary system they call sensor fusion AI. And to understand it, you have to realize how primitive traditional metal detectors actually are.
Right, the ones we've all walked through at an airport or a courthouse.
Exactly. A traditional metal detector operates on very simple physics. It generates a magnetic field. If a conductive material passes through that field, it disrupts the magnetic waves, and the machine registers a change in voltage.
Okay.
But it has absolutely no idea what the object is. It just measures total magnetic disruption. It doesn't know if you are carrying a Glock 19 firearm or if a janitor is walking through with a massive 3-pound ring of brass keys. It just registers a block of metal and emits a giant, annoying beep.
It's a blunt instrument.
Very blunt.
So how does sensor fusion AI change that?
Evolv's system uses ultra-low-frequency electromagnetic fields combined with a powerful CPU mounted directly on the device. As a person walks through the Evolv archway at a normal walking pace, the sensors don't just look for mass.
What are they looking for?
They measure the specific conductivity profile, the density, and the shape of the metal. The AI essentially maps a 3D magnetic wireframe of the object in milliseconds.
A 3D magnetic wireframe. So it is actually looking at the shape of the object without using a camera.
Yes. The AI model has been trained on millions of data points to distinguish between the specific magnetic signature of a heavy steel gun barrel versus the signature of a hollow aluminum smartphone case.
That's wild.
It differentiates between actual weapons like firearms or large tactical knives and what they call nuisance items like phones, keys, laptops, and umbrellas.
And it does all this processing right there at the door. I noticed the 10K heavily emphasizes edge computing. Why is that so critical? Why not just send the sensor data up to Amazon Web Services, have a massive cloud supercomputer analyze it, and send the result back down?
Because cloud latency would completely destroy their core value proposition, which is throughput.
How so?
Think about the last time you walked into a stadium for an NFL game or a massive concert. You have 70,000 angry, impatient fans trying to get through the gates in a 45-minute window. If the scanner has to send a data packet up to a cloud server, wait for the AI to process it, and send the answer back down, that takes maybe 1 or 2 seconds.
I mean, 2 seconds doesn't sound like a long time.
Right. But multiply 2 seconds by 70,000 people, you would have gridlock stretching into the parking lot.
Yeah.
The AI processing must happen at the edge, meaning directly on the machine's local CPU, in real time. It operates seamlessly if people walk through at a normal, unimpeded pace.
And they aren't just doing this for people anymore. They recently launched Evolv Expedite. What is that?
Evolv Expedite applies the exact same sensor fusion AI to bags and parcels. It's an autonomous AI bag screening system.
Like at a theme park.
Yeah, instead of a security guard manually unzipping every backpack and poking around with a stick, the system scans the bag autonomously. It secured 65 customers in its very first year on the market, which represents about 5% of their total customer base. And the adoption is accelerating. They added 16 of those Expedite customers in Q4 alone.
But the real magic here isn't just one smart machine. It is the scale of the deployment. Since 2019, Evolv has screened over 4 billion people worldwide. They currently have over 8,000 connected systems deployed globally. They're screening 4 million people every single day.
Yeah, as you noted earlier, that surpasses the daily volume of the TSA. And that massive scale creates an almost insurmountable network effect against any new startup trying to enter this space.
Explain the network effect here, because usually we hear that term applied to social media, like Facebook is valuable because everyone else is on Facebook. How does a metal detector have a network effect?
Because these 8,000 units are continuously capturing new, real-world threat data. Let's say a criminal syndicate starts producing a brand new type of 3D printed ghost gun that uses a very specific, unusual blend of polymers and minimal metal.
Okay.
The first time an Evolv system encounters that weapon in the real world, or the moment Evolv's engineers test it in their lab, they capture its unique 3D magnetic wireframe. They feed that new signature back into their central AI model. They train the algorithm to recognize it. And then they push a software update out to all 8,000 machines globally.
It's exactly like Tesla's autonomous driving. Every time a single Tesla encounters a weird intersection in Seattle, the whole fleet learns how to navigate it.
Exactly the same principle.
Evolv is doing the exact same thing for physical security. A gun detected in Chicago makes the scanners in a London hospital smarter the very next day.
Exactly. And this constant learning completely changes the workflow for the security guards on the ground. Think about the analog process. You walk through a standard detector, it beeps. The guard tells you to step aside, take out your phone, take off your belt.
Yeah, we've all been there.
You walk through again, it beeps again. Now the guard has to pull out a hand wand and slowly sweep it over your entire body, ankle to shoulder.
It's slow, it's invasive, and it creates massive bottlenecks.
Right. With Evolv, a visitor walks through without stopping or emptying their pockets. If the sensor fusion AI detects a threat, the system doesn't just beep loudly. It sends a silent red box overlay to a digital tablet held by the security guard standing a few feet away.
A red box overlay.
Yeah, the tablet shows a generic outline of a human body, and a red box highlights the exact location of the threat.
So the guard isn't guessing. They know exactly where to look. They can say, "Sir, please remove the object from your left jacket pocket." It eliminates the wanding.
It's incredibly efficient.
But hold on. I have a major pushback here regarding data privacy and the cloud. If this is a highly connected smart system relying on updates and it's mapping everything in everyone's pockets, what happens to that data? Are they storing magnetic silhouettes of high school kids? And practically speaking, what happens if the Wi-Fi goes down at a stadium? If the internet drops, does this $100,000 scanner turn into a giant paperweight?
Those are critical questions. Let's address the operational risk first. If the Wi-Fi goes down, the system absolutely does not become a paperweight. This goes back to why the edge computing CPU is so important.
Right.
The real-time threat detection, the AI actively mapping the magnetic signatures and determining if a weapon is present, happens entirely locally on the machine. It does not require an active internet connection to screen a visitor, detect a gun, and alert the guard's tablet via a local Bluetooth or radio connection.
Okay, so the physical security never drops.
Never. The cloud connectivity is only required for the network effect software updates, which happen asynchronously, and for a secondary analytics application called Evolv Insights.
What does Evolv Insights do?
It's a cloud-based analytics dashboard for the venue administrators. It tracks arrival curves, visitor flow rates, and alarm metrics. It helps stadium managers or school principals optimize their labor costs.
Give me an example.
If the data shows that 60% of students historically arrive in a narrow window, between 7:45 a.m. and 8:00 a.m. The principal knows exactly when to deploy maximum security staff to the front doors and when they can send them back to other duties. So if the Wi-Fi drops, the venue temporarily loses access to this real-time analytics data feeding into the cloud, but the physical threat detection at the door never bottlenecks.
And regarding the data privacy.
Evolv is very clear in their technical documentation that they do not use facial recognition, and they do not store personally identifiable biometric data of the people walking through. The system is mapping the magnetic signature of the objects, not the identity of the person carrying them. The tablet just shows a generic human outline.
Okay, so the technology sounds incredibly advanced. It's frictionless, it learns from the fleet, it optimizes staffing, it respects privacy. But it was exactly this AI technology, and specifically how Evolv's marketing team talked about it, that got them into massive trouble with the Federal Trade Commission.
It really did.
Let's look at how the market reacted to that crisis, because the FTC settlement created the ultimate real-world loyalty test for this company. Let's get into Section 5.
In December 2024, Evolv finalized a settlement with the FTC regarding deceptive marketing claims. The core of the issue was that the FTC felt Evolv had exaggerated the capabilities of its AI in its sales materials. The marketing claimed the scanners could seamlessly detect all weapons while perfectly ignoring all harmless items.
They made it sound like magic.
They promised a level of infallibility that the technology simply couldn't meet in the messy, chaotic real world. The government argued that this absolute language misled consumers, specifically institutional buyers like schools.
And the penalty the FTC handed down wasn't just a slap on the wrist or a simple fine. Evolv was forced to offer a specific cohort of 65 K-12 education customers the absolute right to cancel their contracts without penalty.
Which is unprecedented.
They basically had to open the door, point to the exit, and say, the government says we misled you. If you want out, you can walk away right now, free and clear, and we will refund you.
If you are an investor in a SaaS company that relies on multi-year locked-in contracts for its valuation, that is a terrifying prospect. It is the ultimate diagnostic test. It proves whether your product actually provides indispensable value or if you just had really persuasive, deceptive salespeople.
And the result of that test is what absolutely shocked Wall Street. Out of those 65 eligible school districts who were given a free pass to leave, only 5 customers chose to cancel.
Yeah, just 5.
That represented just 24 physical scanners. 92% of the eligible schools affirmatively chose to retain Evolv. I have to pause here. Put yourself in the listener's shoes. If your cable company or your cell phone provider emailed you tomorrow and said, "We lied to you about our speeds, you can cancel your contract right now with 0 penalty," you would be gone in a heartbeat.
Oh, absolutely.
You'd switch to a competitor just to get a new promotional rate. When a customer base point blank refuses a free exit door, especially after a federal agency tells them they were deceived, it tells you everything you need to know about the product's utility. Why did they stay?
What's fascinating here is that to understand why they stayed, you have to look at the emotional and physical stakes of security in 2026. The Hunter Brook Media investigative report dug deeply into this specific question, interviewing school administrators. And the findings were profound.
What did they find?
Despite the corporate sloppiness and the marketing hyperbole, the product on the ground provides measurable, life-saving results that principals just cannot ignore.
The data in that Hunter Brook report was staggering. They highlighted Alexandria City Public Schools in Virginia. After deploying Evolv, the district saw a 71% reduction in weapons-related incidents. Prince William County saw a 72% drop in knife and box cutter incidents in their very first year of deployment.
The Hunter Brook report quoted school officials essentially saying, "We don't care about the marketing semantics. This is about saving kids." You have to put yourself in the shoes of a high school principal. You have 3,000 teenagers arriving at your building at 7:30 in the morning. Often it's raining or snowing. If you use traditional analog metal detectors, you create a massive slow-moving line outside the school building.
And ironically, as security experts always point out, a massive crowd of students waiting to get through security creates a soft target outside the building.
Exactly. Evolv solves the throughput problem. It allows the students to walk into the warmth of the building naturally. But more importantly than catching weapons at the door, the administrators noted that Evolv acts as a massive psychological and visual deterrent.
Right. If a student knows the AI scanner is at the front door and they've seen it pull a pocket knife off a classmate, they simply stop bringing weapons to campus. The culture of the school changes.
The deterrence factor is invaluable. And this incredible retention dynamic isn't just limited to education. We are seeing massive vertical expansion into other critical infrastructure. Evolv was recently named a preferred physical security provider by the American Hospital Association, the AHA.
That is a massive endorsement. The AHA represents nearly 5,000 member hospitals across the country, and hospitals are dealing with skyrocketing rates of violence in emergency rooms.
They are. Evolv also holds over 50 official sports partnerships, including major franchises like the Houston Astros, the Tennessee Titans, and the Boston Bruins. The common thread across all these verticals, schools, hospitals, stadiums, is that security is fundamentally shifting from a discretionary budget item to mandatory infrastructure.
What do you mean by discretionary versus mandatory?
10 years ago, high-tech security was a nice-to-have feature. A venue bought it for optics, to look good. Today, state laws are actually changing. California passed legislation requiring hospitals to implement automated weapons detection systems by 2027.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. And Georgia is actively debating bills for statewide school security mandates. Once a school principal or a hospital administrator installs Evolv, the switching costs are simply too high.
Right. Because ripping them out and going back to analog metal detectors and manual bag checks is a logistical and political nightmare. They would have to hire dozens of new guards, completely redesign their entryways, and deal with furious parents or nurses demanding to know why the high-duct security system was removed. The inertia heavily favors Evolv.
It does. However, to give our listeners a truly balanced, objective investment roadmap, we cannot just look at the 92% retention rate and declare victory.
Fair point.
The FTC didn't just invent those concerns out of thin air. We must address the legitimate criticisms and the real-world physical limitations of this AI. Because if I'm an investor, this isn't all sunshine and high retention rates. What happens when the machine actually fails? Let's transition to the market skepticism and the inherent risks.
This is crucial. Let's talk about the primary technological risk, which security professionals refer to as the technological gap. What is the gap?
The gap is the immutable laws of physics confronting the demands of a high-throughput environment. There is an inherent trade-off between sensitivity and throughput. No machine is perfect. Evolv allows the venue administrator to manually set the sensitivity level of the AI.
Okay, so it's a dial they can turn.
Exactly. If you crank the sensitivity of the Evolv scanner all the way up to its maximum setting, it will catch every tiny, razor-thin piece of metal.
But if you do that, you destroy the frictionless throughput.
Exactly. If the sensitivity is maxed out, it will trigger what the industry calls nuisance alarms. The AI will flag large umbrellas, thick 3-ring binders with metal rings, dense laptops, and metal eyeglass cases.
And if the machine alarms on every single student's 3-ring binder, you are back to square one. You have a massive line of angry people, the guards are overwhelmed, and the system is effectively useless.
Precisely. The nuisance alarm rate for Evolv typically hovers in the low single digits to the mid-teens, highly dependent on the environment, the demographic of the visitors, and the specific sensitivity settings chosen by the venue. To keep the line moving efficiently, a venue administrator might choose to lower the sensitivity setting. But if you lower it too much to prioritize speed, the system can miss smaller, less dense weapons.
And this isn't just a theoretical debate for engineers. This manifested in a very real, very tragic way. In October 2022, there was a highly publicized controversy at a school using Evolv. A student was tragically stabbed during an altercation. The weapon used was a 7-inch knife.
Yeah, it's an awful situation.
And that 7-inch knife had slipped right through the Evolv Express spanner entirely undetected. Why? Because the school's system sensitivity was calibrated to look for larger mass casualty weapons, specifically firearms, rather than a narrow steel blade. I have to challenge you on this. If a 7-inch combat knife can get through the front door of a high school, isn't the technology fundamentally failing its primary mission?
It is a devastating event, and it raises a deeply important question about how society defines and expects security. It requires us to exercise critical thinking rather than relying on emotional absolutes. The hard truth is that no security system on Earth, not the TSA with its massive X-ray machines, not an army of guards doing manual pat-downs, and not Evolv's AI is 100% foolproof.
So what exactly are these schools buying if it's not a guarantee?
They are buying risk mitigation combined with high throughput. It is a mathematical reduction of probability, not an absolute guarantee of invulnerability. The Evolv AI is specifically designed to force a human operator to make a calculated risk assessment choice based on their venue's specific threat profile.
Give me an example of that choice.
Well, an inner-city school dealing with gang violence might set the sensitivity higher than a corporate office building. An NFL stadium mandates a different setting than a theme park. But the tragic reality of statistics is that edge cases will always exist. And when a failure happens, especially involving a child, it generates massive negative publicity, intense scrutiny, and it directly impacts the stock price.
Okay, so investors must accept that there will inevitably be future headlines about a weapon slipping through. That is baked into the risk profile. But on top of that technological risk, there is a massive operational risk looming on the horizon regarding how these things are actually built.
Yes, the manufacturing transition. Evolv is currently executing a massive supply chain pivot. They are transitioning entirely away from their legacy sole source manufacturer, Columbia Tech. They are in the process of onboarding Plexus Corp as their new global contract manufacturer.
When is that supposed to be finished?
They expect Plexus to be fully ramped up and producing the majority of the scanners in the second half of 2026.
Changing the sole factory that builds your core product while you are simultaneously trying to accelerate your revenue growth to satisfy Wall Street. That sounds like trying to swap out the foundation of a house while you are simultaneously building a third floor.
It is an immense execution risk. Evolv's current valuation is entirely dependent on them hitting those accelerating ARR targets. They need to deploy more machines faster than ever before. If Plexus faces any supply chain hiccups, if there are quality control issues on the new assembly lines, or if deployments get delayed because the hardware simply isn't ready to ship, Evolv's revenue growth will flatline instantly.
And let's not forget, they still have that ongoing SEC probe regarding the past marketing claims and the accounting errors. Any negative findings or massive fines from the SEC could trigger another crisis of confidence, just as they were trying to scale up with Plexus. So let me summarize the bearish case here. We have a company with an incredible product that customers clearly love and refuse to abandon. But it has undeniable technical limitations regarding sensitivity, it faces massive manufacturing execution risk over the next 12 months, and it has a lingering SEC probe hanging over its head.
That is the complete unvarnished risk profile.
And yet, despite all of these massive risks, Wall Street is buzzing with a totally different narrative right now. A narrative that suggests Evolv's standalone risk profile might not actually matter, because Evolv might not even be an independent public company for much longer.
Which brings us to the M&A vibe shift.
Let's look at the final verdict. What is going on here?
Well, if you look at the recent analyst notes, institutional investors are increasingly rating Evolv as a high alpha growth stock. But more importantly, they're viewing it as a prime, highly vulnerable acquisition target. And the catalyst that poured gasoline on this speculation was a massive, highly strategic board crossover event.
Okay, what happened?
On February 12, 2026, Evolv appointed a man named Henrik Kuhl to its board of directors.
Okay, for the listener who doesn't track corporate board appointments, who is Henrik Kuhl, why does one guy joining a board trigger buyout rumors?
Henrik Kuhl is the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Corporate Development at Axon Enterprise, ticker symbol AXON. And his specific primary portfolio at Axon includes overseeing mergers and acquisitions.
Axon, the company that makes police tasers and body cameras.
The exact same company.
This is like seeing the head coach of a rival team hanging out in your team's locker room, looking at your playbooks with a clipboard in his hand. Why would Axon, a giant in the law enforcement and public safety space, want to buy Evolv?
This raises an important question. If we connect the dots, the strategic synergies between the two companies are just overwhelming. First, look at the business models. Both Axon and Evolv operate on the exact same hardware-enabled security-as-a-service subscription model.
How so?
Axon doesn't just sell a police officer a body camera. They sell the camera tied to a highly profitable multi-year subscription to Evidence.com, their cloud storage and AI analytics platform.
Oh, they both use a physical hardware Trojan horse to secure long-term SaaS revenue.
Exactly. Now look at their target markets. Axon absolutely dominates the law enforcement and municipal public safety sphere. Evolv dominates the civilian soft target sphere, the schools, the hospitals, the stadiums, the theme parks.
It's a perfect puzzle piece. Axon owns the streets and the police force. Evolv owns the front door of every civilian building. If there is an incident at an Evolv-secured stadium, the Axon body cam wearing police officers respond. The integration potential for threat data sharing is massive.
Furthermore, you have to look at the scale. At roughly a $1 billion market cap, Evolv is considered a highly synergistic digestible bite for a multi-billion-dollar giant like Axon. Axon has the pristine balance sheet and the massive global supply chain required to easily absorb Evolv. They could fix Evolv's manufacturing bottleneck overnight by running the scanners through Axon's established factories.
And instantly cross-sell Evolv's archways to their massive existing network of government and municipal clients. But I have to rein us in for a second. I want to remind you, the listener, there is absolutely no official buyout announcement. No term sheet has been signed. Could we just be reading way too much into a single board appointment? Could this just be a strategic partnership to share some data APIs?
It could absolutely just be a partnership. But in the ruthless world of corporate finance, placing a top M&A executive from a highly aligned, larger peer directly onto your board of directors is universally recognized as a pre-acquisition alignment move.
Why do they do it?
It is how the acquiring company gets a deep, legally sanctioned inside look under the hood. Cool gets to see Evolv's raw retention data, their unreleased tech pipeline, and the real truth about the SEC probe before Axon risks making a formal, multi-billion-dollar tender offer. Whether an acquisition happens in 3 months, 18 months, or falls apart completely, the broader market is aggressively pricing in the high probability of consolidation in AI physical security space. Evolv is the prime asset.
It is a truly fascinating pivot. From a hardware vendor drowning in accounting errors and SEC probes, to a high-margin AI SaaS platform being eyed by the absolute biggest players in the public safety industry.
And stepping back from the stock price and the M&A rumors, this entire deep dive leaves us with a provocative thought about the future of this technology in our society. We have spent an hour talking about stopping weapons, margins, and supply chains. But think about the data.
What do you mean?
As state mandates like California's hospital requirements or Georgia's potential school bills force the mandatory adoption of AI security archways everywhere we go, what are the societal implications?
That's a good question.
We are looking at a near future where private for-profit tech companies hold a virtual monopoly on the physical movement and security data of millions of civilians daily. If Evolv, or potentially Axon, becomes the literal front door to society, they are tracking when high school students arrive and leave, when hospital workers' shift changes occur, the exact flow of 70,000 fans entering a stadium.
Wow, yeah.
The aggregated, anonymized data they hold about human movement becomes far more valuable than the hardware itself. How that data is monetized, how it is protected from breaches, and how it is ultimately regulated by the government will be the next great frontier for this company and this industry.
From the murky chaos of corporate accounting turmoil to becoming the foundational, indispensable infrastructure of daily societal movement, it is an incredible evolution. You are now armed with the underlying mechanics, the financial realities, and the strategic insights to navigate this volatile sector and understand exactly what is driving the value of Evolv Technologies. Security is shifting from discretionary to mandatory, risk-defined, portfolio protected,